let's just walk through the sample pitch deck. So once again, I think we've already shared this in the past. I'm just highly emphasizing this is more of like a guide. Definitely, you do not need to use orange colors. You don't need to use the exact titles. Like you can, it's just a simply a template guide that you can control. This one's pretty straightforward, just your team name and tagline. And then you're going to get into the problem. So as a reminder, the problem sometimes you need some of your problems might need to catch us normal folks up to the status quo of here's what companies are doing right now, and then here's the real problem behind that. So if it's like super clear and straightforward, you don't necessarily need 2 slides, but some might need a background slide just for explanation. Just making sure we're understanding, like I blew up these pictures in like 5 minutes, so ideally they're a little bit more crisper, but some of your slides for problems can literally just be a picture with a simple percentage or a number or anything like that. So I'll show you an example of one that's not my favorite, but a lot of times problem statements can be very big in the picture, especially if they're pictures that you've taken personally from experiencing the problem and seeing it firsthand. It's totally appropriate. Remember, less words is the better. This is another good example of a problem slide. So if there's multiple issues, so here's the problem with XYZ, and it's a 1, 2, 3. That's, you can use icons. Emphasize it again, little words, just use the icon because you're going to be explaining it. And that's the whole purpose of this, is that it's just a background for you. So here's an example of a problem slide I don't like personally, mainly because there's so much words on here that as soon as I start speaking, you're starting to read the words. And if you actually have something meaningful that's outside the slide, I'm not going to catch it. So if your slides are looking more like this, where even if there's a picture in the background, but it's more words heavy, I would highly encourage you to revise that a little bit and just use icons instead of like all these words here. Okay, next one is the service or product. So if you told me there's a problem, then the next slide is going to say exactly like what your service or product is. And this is where a lot of people mix it up because they start mixing values in with what they're like the benefits of their solution. I just want to know what your actual thing is here. So it could be here's our service and here's how it works. So if it's like a 1, 2, 3 step process, then you can break it out like something like this, where it's step 1, step 2, step 3. So totally appropriate if there's like a linear path that has to be followed. If it's more of just like a straightforward solution, so I know some of you are tackling like the recycling issue. So if my solution was along the lines of we're going to have color-coded bins to show the point, then this is sufficient for a solution slide, maybe with a couple of added words. But this gets the idea across of what you're doing. Obviously, if you build something even better, and that can come later. So now we're on to like the actual, so that was like your service slide. Now this is the actual solution. So now I'm bridging the gap. So you told me you had a problem. Here's what the actual product or service is. And now you're explaining how the product or service solves the original problem you talked about. So I've met with a few of you, and when we got to this slide, you told me one problem, but then you came here and that problem slightly addressed, and all of a sudden you're trying to solve like 3 or 4 more. So the cleanest pitches are just going to keep me very in sync. This is the specific problem. This is what we're doing to solve the problem, and this is how it actually is going to solve the problem. So it could be, a 1, 2, 3, type thing. Solutions here, it's like just very clear if here's the benefits of the solution. And so this is where I highly encourage you to put numbers, right? We could save you 30% time. We could increase your revenue by X. We could save you X amount of money. So the more specific you are here, the more you're going to quantify like how much you actually solve the issue. Okay, then you're moving into the MVP. This is where this competition starts to move, because if you've been in the Idaho Entrepreneur Challenge, which is coming up in the spring, which I encourage all of you to do, a lot of times you start projecting what's going to happen or maybe what you've done, but a lot of times it's more futuristic. This competition is focusing of like, okay, what'd you do over the last 2 weeks? So once again, on the earliest classes, we talked about how this might be the car, right? Like this is your dream of like, this is what the actual solution would be. The MVP is just going to say, here's what we did over 2 weeks to test it. And so this is making it realistic and saying, how did you actually apply this over the last 2 weeks, other than just being like in the idea stage? So this is a picture that was taken last year by one of the winners. I forget what place they were, I think second, but give or take. They were working out like a physical prototype, and they took a picture of the physical prototype, and that was in their pitch. Here's us, we knew in 2 weeks we couldn't build this gigantic thing, but we decided to build this. And this is a picture of us building it. And then they showed a picture of the end product. So that kind of told the story of how they were actually active. For others, maybe it's just a mock-up. So we got together with our team and we did a mock-up of what the app would look like, and and pass it over to the vendors. So ideally, I'm knowing like what you did. And then this is the key slide. This is what's really going to pull it in, is the results and feedback. Okay, so you did something. Ideally, you did something. What happened? What did you learn? In one of the earlier classes, we talked about the learning card. And after you do an experiment, you say, okay, here's what happened, here's what we learned, and here's what's next. That's essentially like what you learned is right here. You're just telling me like, what's the results of the test and what are your takeaways? What did you learn? From there, it can be a couple things. If you learn like, hey, this group doesn't need it, but this group really needs it, that would be a great place. If you're still of the mindset of like everyone, within this home building industry needs it, then, you potentially could skip this. But we typically say like, who would you want to launch, based on your testing, who do you think is ready to launch with like now? Going back to that picture with the two girls, they had a product and they could answer the slide by saying like, we already know there's 2 partners that are ready to do this with us. Like they liked it enough, they're ready to move forward. So if you can specify that you have, your problem sponsor is interested or a different one popped up, this is the time to place like, hey, we're ready to go. And then the last thing is just, what are the next steps? So, okay, so moving this competition, if you were to win, and that's where I think it's appropriate to say, if we won the funds, this is what we could put it towards to help us actually make this more real. And so a good slide like that would just be a next steps of like a 1, 2, 3, or it could be a 1, 2, and these could be unrelated. So it could be, we're gonna do more MVP tests and we're gonna create a marketing plan and blah, blah, blah. Or it could be like more linear. We're gonna do this and then this and then this. So it's just understanding. So let's translate this back to the judging criteria. So you're getting judged on how likely is the team going to execute on this. You're answering that between this slides, the next steps, and also the previous slides of like what you did over the last 2 weeks. Because if I'm a judge and I see that you've done a lot of progress and you have the capabilities of at least starting tests and proving things out, then you're going to get high grades. Also, the results of the test, the feedback, I think that's going to play heavy. If there was one slide that's going to impact you on industry adoption, it's probably going to be this one, because you're saying, okay, we had a theory, we had a guess that this would help. Here's what the results are. And based on those results, we think the industry is like definitely going to love us because we did exactly what we wanted. And then at the end, so then you're going to have a basic team slide if it fits. So this would be very quickly. The bridge to here, the cleanest bridge is you just told me what the next steps are. And then this is telling me, like, giving me confidence on why you're the team to do it. So it doesn't have to be very long, and you don't even have to mention everyone by name. Just say, we have a team of 5 that has skill sets from engineering all the way to X. And we have the background and capability to do this. But at this point, this is like a cherry on the top. Because even if you didn't have this slide, I would still be convinced whether or not you're the team, probably based on the previous slides. This is just kind of putting the cherry on top of, in case there's education or background or connections that would put you above and beyond. And then you're just going to roll into questions. So when you finish after this, roll into questions. So to be very clear, you can mix and match the order. There was one student that was saying, hey, I actually think I would do much better if I put the team slide at the very beginning because I have a more personal story about this that I can relate to. Absolutely. If you don't feel like there's a slide that specifically fits, it's not 100% requirement. We're just telling you in general, this is the slides that most judges will be looking for. And if you want to mix and match that order, no worries. It's more of just like framing a story that flows. And that's where I'll just do the last plug of schedule time to do pitch practice. The last thing I just want to mention was on the so on one of the teams, they had, my first question after their pitch was, well, what are the finances? Like, how much are you, what are you collecting for? How much are you selling for, et cetera? And the response, which is totally appropriate, was, well, you made it sound like we didn't need financials, like we didn't have a really financial slide. If there is a business model that like doesn't clearly 100% make sense, you at least want to have that as a backup slide, if not as part of your regular, just to show like how this could be a viable business. Meaning, like, could you actually exist beyond, like, we're not looking for charity or services or volunteer work. We're looking for actual businesses. And so it's appropriate to say, like, here's what we think we could charge. That could be part of your next steps is, we're working on a pricing model. Here's what we're thinking. Or if you already know, you can just put it straight up forward. But worst case, you can have backup slides. So that's the last thing I'd say is, after your question slide, you can have other additional slides. So if like certain questions, you think certain questions are going to come up, you can have anywhere from 2 to 5 extra slides, so that you're still in control afterwards. Oh, that's a great question. We actually have a slide for this. Let me pull it up. Boom. This is our answer, and it's supported by a slide. So you don't have to go crazy. But my last tip for you would be pitch to several people, mentors, venture college folks, and just see what those initial questions are. That's really what some of the gold. You're not necessarily saying, how can I change my pitch? But those initial questions will tell you, like, okay, did I not articulate something? Or is there just content that's not on this pitch that I need to have a backup slide for? And then you can have a backup slide and you look really, really good when you can pull it up and say, yep, I got the answer for that.